Chapter 14. "You know," AJ said the next morning as he and Jeff sat at the little bar by the kitchen, hurriedly munching breakfast, "I think it'd be better if we take the car and leave the pickup here." Jeff chewed his toast as he looked over at AJ questioningly. The last thing AJ wanted to do was to alarm his friend, but the concern in his chest needed to be voiced. However, to soften the impact, he shrugged. If the girls need to go down for some groceries or something, they'd be better off in the pickup. Understanding slid through Jeff's eyes, and he nodded. "That's probably a good idea." "And I was thinking," AJ said, treading carefully across the thoughts that had slipped into and out of his consciousness all night. "Since you have a cell and Eve has a cell, maybe we should take yours, just in case. Not that we'll need to use them or anything." Jeff nodded. "That's probably smart. It's a good thing we know there's a tower somewhere out here." The call to Gabe the night before had gone smoothly, and to AJ that was a good sign. Lisa's door snapped open, and the two men looked back to her. "Morning," she said, although she didn't look fully awake. "I was afraid you might have left already." "Nope, just grabbing some breakfast," Jeff said, and he hugged her when she stepped into his arms. "We got some more new snow last night, so those first few runs should be unbelievable." "Well, don't let them be too unbelievable. I'd like it if you come back in one piece." She hit him softly with her hand. Then she looked over at AJ, who was trying not to intrude on their moment. "Don't let him do anything too dumb today." AJ smiled at her, hoping Eve hadn't let her in on all of his secrets. "I'll try to make him behave." "I'd appreciate that," Lisa said with a small laugh. She broke away from Jeff and walked around the counter to the cabinets. "Is Eve still sleeping?" "She had a pretty rough day yesterday," AJ said. "I think I wore her out." An amused glance from Lisa landed on him, and instantly he wanted to take the words back. "Skiing can be so tiring," Jeff said just before he tipped his bowl up and drank the rest of the milk. Quickly, AJ stood and took his dish over to the dishwasher. "I'm gonna go get my stuff." He took off down the hallway, the conversation behind him fading. "Would you be nice to him?" Lisa asked softly. "I am," Jeff protested. "No, you're not." AJ closed the door to his room quietly. The only good thing was that Eve hadn't been privy to that little scene. In fistfuls, he yanked up the gear he needed to take and stuffed it into his bag. At least flying down a mountain, they wouldn't have a chance to talk. He would just have to make sure Jeff didn't get a chance, or he knew what his friend suspected about his feelings would be verified in a heartbeat. Taking his gear, he went back out to the kitchen, listening for voices, but hearing none. A step into the kitchen, he realized why. Only Lisa remained, sitting at the bar drinking from a mug. "I take it you don't like to sleep late," AJ said, figuring the best defense was a good offense. "Not these days," she said with a laugh. "Too much action around my midsection." "So, how are you feeling?" AJ asked as he sat down 2 seats over from her and went about inspecting his gear. "Pretty good," she said. "A little tired since we've been up here, though." "Thin air," he said knowingly. "I'm surprised your doctor let you come." "Well, I go back the day after we get home. I just hope I'm not too jet-lagged that he'll notice." AJ looked at her, gauging the meaning of that answer, although he knew it wasn't his place to ask. "We're going to take the cell phone, and you all can have Eve's. That way, if you need something, you can get in touch with us." "Oh," she said in surprise. "Okay." "And we're leaving the pickup here," AJ said, suddenly wondering if leaving was such a good idea. "Did you get the directions to a doctor here?" Lisa shrugged. "Some old guy with a little clinic in town." "What's his name?" AJ asked, not sure how she would take the inquiry, but not really caring. "Breely, Horace Breely," she said without hesitation. "I even saw the clinic on the way in." "But besides the tired thing, you're feeling all right?" "I'm fine," Lisa said as Jeff tripped over his duffel bag when he came out of their room. Skiing would be a whole lot more fun if you didn't have to lug 700 pounds of junk along to do it," Jeff said, throwing the things out from the doorway into the room before closing the door behind him. "Don't strain yourself," Lisa said in amusement. "You're one to talk," Jeff said, riding the duffel bag by the door. "Miss, I brought everything in my closet just in case." Lisa shrugged good-naturedly. You never know what you're going to need. Now you sound like someone else I know, AJ said as his heart swooped forward. Don't encourage her, Jeff warned. It doesn't matter, AJ said. They do it with or without encouragement. Hey, that's a two-way street there, Lisa said, ambling over to Jeff, who was still fighting with his gear by the door. When he stood, any pretend animosity dropped away from between them. You have our number, right? Jeff asked, and Lisa nodded. Oh, man, what about Eve's? How are we going to get in touch with you? Lisa shrugged. We'll give you a call when she gets up. Are you sure? Jeff said as he leveled a serious gaze at her. Lisa laughed. I can remember to make one phone call. Baby hasn't eaten that many brain cells. Okay, but you take care of yourself, Jeff said gravely. I will, Lisa laughed again. And don't you go flying off any mountains or into any trees. Just a couple, Jeff said teasingly. Lisa pulled him to her for a hug. Well, at least you're smart enough to bring a paramedic along. Can't be too careful, Jeff said, and then he kissed her. Love you. I love you. We'll be back about 5:30 or so. Thanks for the warning. She let him go, and he gathered up his things. Then, gently, she put a hand on his back, and when she turned to AJ, he saw the trace of concern in her eyes. Take care of him for me. Will do. Okay, what's up with you and Eve? Jeff asked from his perch in the driver's seat. The fact that they had made it halfway to the ski slope had seemed like such a good sign until that very moment. Up? AJ asked, examining his fingernails like they held the final key to solving world peace. Why? Okay, you're dumb, but you can't be blind, too, Jeff shot. Gee, thanks. Seriously, are you interested in her, or what? Who wouldn't be? She's gorgeous, AJ said offhandedly. Slowly, Jeff shook his head. No, it's more than that. I see how you look at her, and I think she's happier when you're around, too. I wouldn't know. I've never seen her when I'm not around. Jeff drove down around 4 sharp corners before he looked back over at AJ. Look, I don't have to tell you that Eve is like a sister to me, and I also don't have to tell you how hard on her Dustin's death was. But I think you need to know that I see something when she looks at you, something that hasn't been there in a long time. Just don't shut the door on the possibilities, okay? AJ knew far more about what was possible than Jeff ever would. Eve had told him outright. I'll keep that in mind. We're supposed to call them and give them your number, Lisa said when Eve stood in the kitchen making herself breakfast at just after 10. Why? Mischievousness traced through Lisa's eyes, and she dropped her voice seductively. AJ said he didn't want to go even an hour without hearing your voice. Ha ha. Eve sat down at the bar. No, I think they're afraid I'm going to go into labor or something, Lisa said, as if that was silly. Okay, that's not even funny. I didn't think so either, but I figured we'd better humor them or they're going to be coming back up here every hour to check on us. Lisa started for Eve's room. Where is it? Right side of the suitcase, Eve said as she poured milk over her cornflakes. In minutes, Lisa was back, talking, and a smile crossed Eve's heart. Jeff and Lisa, the two most unlikely people to hook up in the whole world. Yet, here they were, a month from the second miracle of their lives. But no black diamonds, right? Lisa asked. And don't let him talk you into any bowls, either. Okay, just a second. I'll get it. She pulled the phone away from her ear. Phone number? Eve quickly relayed the digits, almost wishing that Lisa would think to let her talk to AJ. She should have been smart enough to get out of bed this morning to tell him goodbye, but the dream she was having held her in a vice grip. Even here, over a bowl of cold cornflakes, it was right there. There was something about that dark hallway, something about being so close to him, and yet knowing that throwing logic to the wind wasn't an option. Over and over her brain would put her there as her heart willed her to make a different choice. However, the choice was, and always would be the same. It had to be. Lisa beeped off the phone. I think they're going to go do the black diamonds. Eve shrugged, looking at the phone Lisa laid on the counter. I thought that was the plan. Yeah, but blacks? Ugh, that's so dangerous. Before she thought about it, Eve laughed. That's nothing. I think AJ and danger are like one and the same. Her brain caught up with her mouth just as the words left, and she looked over at the mortified face of her friend. But I'm sure they won't do too many dumb stunts. Jeff's smart enough to keep AJ in line. I hope so, Lisa said as she sat on one of the stools. She looked over at Eve. It's getting worse. What? Eve asked with concern. Letting him go. It was bad enough when it was just me, but now... Her gaze fell to her rounded stomach. It's so hard to watch him walk out that door. Compassion washed through Eve. AJ will take care of him. Lisa seemed to consider that a moment. Then she looked at Eve, and the subject changed in the middle of her eyes. So? Lisa asked leadingly, as she leaned onto the counter. So what? Eve asked innocently, as she spooned cornflakes into her mouth. So what happened last night? We watched a movie, Eve said with a shrug. Remember? You were there. Not the movie. AJ. Were there fireworks after we went to bed? We talked for a while, Eve said, holding the truth closer to her vest. She hated the fact that AJ was so sensitive about the teasing. She felt responsible for that. If she would have just been a little cooler about the whole thing when they got home, maybe Jeff and Lisa wouldn't have embarrassed him so much. However, the strange thing was, it seemed he was more concerned about her than about himself, and she couldn't quite figure that out. Lisa exhaled in frustration. You two should be on Oprah for as much as you talk. Eve shrugged. We're friends. Uh-huh, and that whole sitting next to his chair when there was one across the room thing? What was that about? The floor looked comfortable. Come on, Eve. Why don't you just admit you like him? I mean, what's there not to like? He's sweet, and he's cute, and you're married. Yeah, but you're not. The words superseded any thought on Lisa's part, and her enthusiasm deflated with them. You know what I mean. Yeah, Eve said softly. I do. Look, you don't have to sell me on him. I'm already sold. He's great, but as a friend. Is that the only word you know? It's the only one I want to know. Come on, Lise. I come with more baggage than a 747. He doesn't deserve that. He's free, and he's having fun. I don't want to drag him down. But he cares about you, and not just as a friend either. Panic surged through Eve. Why? Has he said something? Did he say something to Jeff? He doesn't have to say anything. It's not about words. It's about how he looks at you and how you look at him, and the fact that for the first time in a very long time, you're letting someone get close to you. That's real, Eve, whether you want to admit it or not. Slowly, she shook her head. He's just being nice. Because he likes you. We're friends. I know, you told me that. Lisa sighed slowly. Look, remember when Jeff and I first got together? Oh man, Panic City. But you kept telling me how he was different around me than he was around any other girl he'd been out with. Well, I'm telling you that about yourself now. You're different when you're with AJ. When he's around, you look like you want to live again. That's something special, and I don't want you to throw it away because you think you can only be friends, or that you have to stay friends because of the past. Eve wanted to protest, but no words came out of her mouth. You know, Lisa said thoughtfully, you told me once that if you ever had the chance to do it all again, you'd do it in a heartbeat. Well, maybe this is your chance. But I had it. I had my chance, and it's gone. No, Lisa said gently. Only Dustin is gone. AJ is right here. As that thought ran through Eve, Lisa jumped slightly. Oh, she said, laying a hand on her stomach. What? Eve asked, instantly glad for the diversion from her thoughts, but uneasy about the form it came in. A moment, and then Lisa shook her head. Sometimes those Braxton Hicks contractions get serious. She breathed a couple more times before she relaxed. Listen, Eve, I think I'm going to go lay down for a little while. Do you mind? Do what you need to do. I can find something to keep me busy. Carefully, Lisa slid off the stool. Think about what I said. Eve nodded and watched her friend cross the full length of the living room. When Lisa had gone into her bedroom and closed the door, Eve thought about Lisa's words. Dustin was gone. The man she thought was the only one she would ever love had been stolen from her grasp, and now, in front of her, stood someone new. Someone who felt so close to her own soul that it scared her breathless. She put her dish in the dishwasher, grabbed a pillow from the couch, and flopped into the chair he had occupied the night before. Her gaze went to the snow falling gently outside the window as she let her mind drift, to him, to AJ, and for the first time, she placed no limits on where those thoughts could take her. A black diamond? Jeff asked skeptically. AJ looked over the edge. It's an easy one. And you're going to explain the broken leg to Lisa? Hey, you heard her. You're with a paramedic. How much safer could you get? Reality swirled away from Eve, and suddenly she was back in the dark hallway, sensing him barely inches away from her. Only this time, she wasn't hoping he would turn and go into his room. No, every piece of her wanted him to step next to her, to take her in his arms. As she closed her eyes, she felt the warmth of him closing the space between them, making time stand still. Are you sure? His voice asked softly. Yeah, she breathed, willing him to make the space between them vanish. Eve, a voice outside her head said, but it wasn't his. Eve? Instantly, she was awake, and the dream fell away from her. Lisa? With one glance, reality surged forward. What's wrong? Lisa stood, hunched slightly with her hand on her stomach. I think we need to call somebody. Call? Eve sat up in the chair. Who? The doctor, Lisa said as she doubled over. Oh my gosh, the baby? As Lisa nodded, Eve vaulted from the chair and over to her friend. Contractions? You're having contractions? Again Lisa nodded. Oh gosh. Air failed. Phone, where's the... In the middle of her panic, she found the phone on the bar. What's his number? Do you have a phone book? Lisa leaned back into the couch as the contraction subsided. The number's in our room, in my black carry-on. Without asking any more, Eve raced to the open bedroom door and scanned the room. Black carry-on. One swipe, and it was on the bed. She pushed the strands of hair out of her face as her hand searched. Side pocket, Lisa called from the living room. Got it, Eve said, yanking the paper from its hiding place. She fought to breathe, to think as she crossed with the number back out into the living room. Quickly, her fingers dialed the number as panic flooded through her. The phone clicked. Yes, is this... She looked at the note in her hand. Dr. Brealey's office? Okay, good. Listen, my friend just went into labor. I need to know what to do. How far apart are the contractions, ma'am? How far apart are the contractions, Lise? About 4 minutes, I think. About 4 minutes, Eve said, pushing the hair back from her face as she watched Lisa's face and body contract again. Oh no, here's another one, Lise. She knelt down by the couch and laid a hand on her shoulder, wishing she could do something more to help her friend. How far away are you from the hospital? The lady asked. We're about 30 minutes from town, Eve said, fighting to keep rational with her. Okay, the hospital is on the far east side of town. Once you get to town, you'll see the signs. I'll have the doctor meet you there. Oh, okay. What's the patient's name? Lisa Taylor. When she signed off, Eve's brain immediately ran into 6 different problems. I've got to get the directions back down. Where would they be? I think he put them in our suitcase, Lisa said, trying to get comfortable but obviously not succeeding. Okay. Eve took half of a calming breath and raced back into the bedroom. Suitcase. She headed for it and grabbed the top clothing. Crud, where are they? The gasp from the couch did nothing to settle her nerves. Lisa, are you okay? But there was no answer. Please, God, I can't do this alone. Where are they? Deciding at the bottom of the suitcase that the directions weren't there, Eve redirected her search to the dresser drawers. She was making a huge mess, but there weren't enough brain cells to care. Papers. With one hand, she grabbed the sheaves from the top drawer. Thank you, God. Her feet traced back out into the living room. I found them. Could we call Jeff? Lisa asked, and her voice was filled with the panic that laced Eve's entire body. Yeah, I'll call them. I've got to get my boots. Dialing even as she ran to her room, Eve's mind was so jumbled she wasn't sure that what was going to come out of her mouth would have any basis in reality. She yanked one boot on as the phone rang. It rang again. Oh, come on. She grabbed the other boot and pulled it on. Still the phone rang. Come on, pick up the phone. The moan from the living room yanked her attention away from the phone, and she hit the off button. Back in the living room, she surveyed the situation and prayed sincerely for divine help. She certainly needed more than she had. We're going to have to get you to the pickup, Eve said like a drill sergeant. Where are your shoes? Bedroom. Eve headed back to the bedroom, her mind sliding through her previous 2 visits, looking for the shoes before she got there. She threw the clothes at the end of the bed back into the suitcase in a heap and yanked the shoes from the floor. Her legs carried her into the living room where she slipped the shoes on Lisa, and she stood to survey her friend. Coat? Back of the door, Lisa said as another contraction clamped over her. Torn between staying with her friend and getting things ready so they could go, Eve finally chose getting ready. Sitting here wasn't going to help, and it was obvious that Lisa needed more help than Eve could give her. She grabbed the coat and Lisa's purse for good measure. You okay? She asked, knowing it was a dumb question. The pain subsided from Lisa's face. Did you get the guys? We'll call them from the pickup, Eve said, not wanting to panic her friend. She went to the couch and did her best to help Lisa up. Sanity clicked in long enough to grab the keys from the counter, and they started for the door. They had a scant 4 minutes to get to the pickup. Okay, I know you don't want to hurry, but I don't think contractions in the snow sound like much fun, so... At that moment, Eve pulled the curtain back on the double sliding doors to reveal a winter wonderland of white and gray. Oh, jeez. Okay. Eve corralled her own alarm as she slid the door open. We're going to have to be real careful down these steps. Already little tufts of snow had accumulated on the steps. One slow step at a time, they descended. How are you doing? You okay? Lisa nodded, clearly not wanting to use precious energy on speaking. Good girl. Finally, they reached the bottom. Careful, some of this might be deeper than it looks. She was breathing through the seconds, ticking them off in her head with every step they took. They were running out of time to get to the pickup door. She looked at Lisa. She would have liked to tell her to hurry, but hurrying wasn't a great idea either. A little further, just a little... Oh! Lisa gasped as she grabbed for Eve. 6 more steps, Eve coached. In that same second, Lisa's eyes crumpled on the pain as she moaned. Breathe, Eve said, stopping in utter helplessness. Just breathe. She had no idea how to do baby breathing, and the truth was, she wasn't breathing either. But somewhere in the back of what little she knew about having a baby, there was something about breathing. Lisa's fingers wrapped into Eve's arm as Eve stood, watching, powerless to help. After many agonizing seconds, Lisa finally nodded and straightened enough so that Eve knew they could get the rest of the way to the pickup. With a swipe, Eve cleared the stacked snow from the passenger's door. It was a struggle to get Lisa up into the cab, but when she was in the pickup, Eve breathed a sigh of relief. Just get her to the hospital. Everything will be fine. Race you down, Jeff said as he stood at the top of the steepest example of a black diamond they had encountered so far that day. I thought you didn't do black diamonds, AJ said with a laugh. I thought I didn't too. With that, Jeff jumped off the top, swinging his skis expertly side to side over the moguls. Slowly, AJ shook his head. Lisa would surely kill him if she ever found out. "I've just got to get this thing turned around," Eve said as the immensity of the pickup's frame suddenly became very real in her consciousness. She put a hand on the gearshift and pulled it into drive. With the first pressure of the gas, the tires spun underneath them. Focusing on her breathing, if only to keep herself sane, Eve turned the pickup wheels to the side, and the pickup bucked forward. "Oh, easy," Lisa moaned. "Sorry." The windshield wipers swiped across the windshield, causing Eve to jump. "Come on." Cautiously, they angled across the road, but the banks on either side came up to the pickup's grill. She drove as far forward as she could, then put the gearshift into reverse. However, when she turned around to look out the back, snow was all she saw. She threw the pickup into park. "Just a second." With just more than a swing, she got into the pickup bed, and the snow crunched right over the top of her boots. Quickly, she wiped off the fluffy white mess covering the back window. Then she jumped back to the ground and crawled in just as Lisa pulled her shoulders forward to her knees. "Another one?" The only reason for the question was to reassure herself that some part of her short-circuited system still worked. She put the pickup in reverse and started backing just as the full impact of the contraction hit Lisa. "Ow!" Lisa screamed, and for 1 second too long, Eve's attention went to her friend. In the next split second, she felt the back end of the pickup sink. When she looked into the windshield, it wasn't the road she saw. It was trees. Quickly, she shifted gears to go forward. However, the pickup did little more than spin. "No, no, no, come on." Rocking her body in a desperate attempt to get the vehicle to move, she fought off insanity. "Oh no," Lisa said in fear next to her, and Eve looked at her. Blank numbness gazed back at her. "I think my water just broke." "Uh-oh." Desperately, Eve rocked forward, but the tires did no more than spin. After another frantic moment, rational kicked her in the head. The pickup wasn't going anywhere. Guilt washed over her as she glanced at Lisa. "Well, I guess we have to go to Plan B." Trust, because there was no other option, was in Lisa's eyes. "What's Plan B?" "I have no idea." "Man, those clouds look worse than they did yesterday," AJ said, appraising the clouds sliding over the mountains in the distance. The thick, dark gray clouds had no trouble completely obscuring all traces of the majestic peaks. The lift ascended higher, drifting up toward their destination. "Isn't that where the cabin is?" Jeff asked with some concern. "Yeah. You know, we haven't heard anything from the girls since this morning. You think they're okay?" "Wouldn't hurt to check," AJ said, feeling that same vague unease he had the day before as he looked at those clouds. Ominous hardly described them. Jeff needed no more prompting. He pulled the little cell phone out and looked at it. Oh, man, it was off. Off? With short punches, Jeff clicked the phone on and dialed the number. It must have gotten shut off in my pocket. That news didn't help the apprehension in AJ's chest. His whole focus went to his friend's face as they waited. Concern turned to confusion, and then to fear the longer Jeff sat without talking. AJ's gaze went back up to the invisible mountain as he tried to think through the situation. Finally, Jeff hit the off button. They don't answer. Don't answer? That doesn't make any sense. They'd have to hear it. The other side of the conversation dropped away as Jeff redialed the number. He waited. AJ waited, fighting not to let the fear crawl into his gut. Jeff shook his head slowly, waited a moment more, and then hit the off button. Nothing. AJ looked at Jeff, and then at those clouds. He wanted to panic, but that wasn't going to help Jeff, who had already paled to 3 shades of white. We'll call them again at the bottom. Maybe there's something in the way up here. Granted, that didn't exactly seem possible, but it was the most plausible excuse he could come up with. Besides, he knew Jeff already knew the score. One look at his face was enough to verify that. Closing his eyes, AJ willed his strength into Eve just in case she needed it at that moment. However, when he opened them, all he saw were those clouds, and fearful anxiety twisted inside him. This has been White Knight, Book 2, The Courage series, written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings.
Never miss a second of the story. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel today.